I think there is a stark contrast of how many people or players, in fact, are willing to play the bad guy within esports, just in general, but specifically, we're going to be talking about League of Legends and the LCS in particular. Because when you look at the LCS currently in this current day and age, where are the fucking bad guys? Where are the heels of our esports itself? They're nowhere to be found. And you could even point to maybe some of them that might exist in the current day and age of LCS, which is like Jensen to a certain degree, but he's kind of forced in that role because people just hate him inherently. And I think it's because he was the biggest challenge to Bjergsen. And there was like this particular jealousy of fans in that essence, and that their king was being challenged. Secondly, you have Dardoch, who has been kicked from a lot of different teams, and he's kind of the villain of both the teams and also the fans. And so there is that weird dynamic that's going on, but he's trying to be like this good guy going forward and to rebuild his brand and whatnot. You have Sven Skaren, who appears to be the bad guy in some points, but only when it kind of benefits him or when he's in a particular scenario to where he's not really losing that much and he can kind of afford to spend some of his, let's just call it the social credit, in order to be the heel in that moment. You have Doublelift previously, who was basically the bad guy of the LCS for quite a long time. And in fact, the only time that when people started to respect him was when he started to win. And I think you'll realize this as a trend as I go forward in this scenario. You have Gillius previously, who was actually a very big heel over in, the EU LCS before, or the LEC. And then he had to taper that off. And he specifically said within an episode of the show with Loco Doco and Thorin, which basically he was saying that he was tired of being shit on because he was the bad guy. And so he had to taper that down to meet expectations of, people hating on him as such. And so the entire premise of this is that you got to be good in order to be a heel, in order to be the bad guy within esports. That just seems to come with the territory, and it seems to be just more and more relevant as things go on just within the entire public forum, as it were, within any different industry anyways. And you can't be the bad guy without being good also in terms of your ability to perform at whatever discipline that you're trying to do. And we could even think of even let's go to the broadcast scenario of like someone which I would consider somewhat of a heel a little bit is MarkZ, and the fact that he is a little bit more negative on the broadcast than a lot of the other analysts on there. Or you look at Crumbs, who also poses different ideas which a lot of people don't even think of or even have the inclination to bring up, and he's the one to do this and to go against the grain. And so therefore he then becomes the heel of the broadcast just by the inherent nature of his proposition. And so this idea of being the heel is also very difficult to do within just a broadcast scenario. And largely, I think it's a little bit easier for casters to get away with this aspect of being the heel or being the bad guy, because winning doesn't necessarily apply to you, because it's like, well, what is winning as a caster? You don't have this objective nature of, you getting the W or you getting the L, right? Versus on Summoner's Rift, that clearly is the case because of the programming, which is, into it to the actual video game of itself. So, but being good does actually help in the broadcast scenario too. But I also want to point out one instance to where maybe people might confuse the idea of being the bad guy or being the heel is Freak. I don't actually think Freak is a heel because he's performing this easy target to be the a criticism that a lot of fans already have about North America or the LCS, and he's just voicing that, right? He's not voicing a differentiating opinion about, the entire landscape or whatnot, which is, I think that's the main criteria to be the bad guy, is that you have something that opposes the general consensus, and you do it in such a way to be kind of dramatic in a sense. And I don't think Freak fills that entire criteria of both of those things at the same time, which is why I would not consider him an actual bad guy, like a true bad guy of the broadcast. He might be a bad guy to the players or, to the teams themselves because he's criticizing them, but he's not a bad guy to the entire community as a whole because his criticism is accepted in this light because of the LCS and the poor play that we're seeing, which we can all fucking see. Now, you want to go on the idea of maybe bad guys within the scene. LS, Monty, Thorin, Dom, all these guys are inherently bad guys within the scene because they offer very big criticisms and also criticisms to which maybe you might not even think of to begin with. And they don't shout out the obvious as to why these things should be criticized to begin with, right? It's very difficult to understand exactly their point of criticism because maybe you have to understand their ideas more on a fundamental level, especially when you're considering someone like LS as such, because his thoughts or his ideas are so abstract. And so that's why it's difficult to grasp his actual criticisms, as the basis of his argument. Same thing with Monte Cristo. He's always been this guy that has been like the OG of bad guys. And it was because he represented this idea that went against the general narratives that were always put out, especially upon the English broadcast. And he would constantly challenge them, and he would constantly challenge fans as well too. So that's why, I personally have a lot of respect for him because he's willing to have that courage in order to challenge the general consensus or narrative, which makes him actually a bad guy and makes him a heel. And he has understood this within his broadcasting career. You could see this through several different broadcasts or podcasts and videos of which he describes his function as a caster and how he viewed himself in terms of the dynamic of the cast itself or the analyst desk and whatnot. Thorne obviously is probably the quintessential person of what it is to be a heel. And although people might think that he is just some edgy fucking guy that does shit on a whim because he wants to be eccentric or he wants to be different. No, it's very clear that this guy realizes that he's being the heel, he's being the villain of, in fact, the entire esports industry. Not even just representing the broadcast itself or being an analyst, I guess, if you want to go into CSGO or even in League of Legends. It's the fact that he realizes that he's providing a different role that currently not a lot of people are providing, and he's willing to do that across multiple different games and industries in that regard. And that I think is very brilliant because it's an under-provided role, as long as you're willing to kind of bear the hellish fire of the fans themselves. Same thing with I Will Dominate. He's willing to do the same thing too and be hated on because he wants to represent his genuine opinion, which is, I think respectful in and of itself too. And so I think that it's not done enough, and this is why you only see these limited amounts of people doing this. And you could even extend this into the journalism space, because I done a previous video talking about how there really just aren't enough critics within esports journalism and how it's a very lacking space. And even just considering that, just opinions in general, because if you put out your opinions, someone might disagree with you, and so therefore you could look like the bad guy. And so these journalists don't even want to take that risk in that regard. And so I feel like this is because it truly is becoming more taxing than in previous conceptions of the role of the heel or of the bad guy. And this is in part due to our interconnectivity as human beings, in the sense that now we have the internet. Now it's full-fleshed, and now everyone knows how to use it. Previously, before, not everyone knew how to fucking use it because they were just stupid. But also in part due to social media as well, and just how fans and content creators and shoutcasters and analysts and streamers and pro players, they're all synced and interconnected with the entire fan base or the public, to where now it becomes much more obvious when people actually hate you or view you as the heel or the bad guy. And then on top of that, I also have, I guess, the inclination that fans don't actually know how to be fans. And maybe I'll make a separate video on this, but it's that sometimes fans take it too far in terms of their hate. Because when I think of just the general, I don't know, you could think of NFL or American football, in fact, and you could spot the fans that don't actually know how to be fans. And I've said this before in a previous video, talking about the idea that sometimes fans take it too far and they don't know the social norms of what it is to be a fan. In essence, that you're essentially playing a game when you're a fan of any sport, because first of all, we all realize that it's a game and it's a sport, and in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't fucking matter, right? It's not like you're curing cancer while you're throwing a football, right? It doesn't matter at the end of the fucking day. But as such, we all realize in the fandom that it doesn't matter, but we like to jibe and kind of jab at each other in different fan bases because it's fun. We're all playing this game and we're all in on this game. But there are some people that just aren't socially aware about the game and how it's played properly. And so that's why you have these types of outbursts within social media and whatnot. And it becomes even more frequent because of the access of social media in and of itself. So this is why you don't see a lot of heels or a lot of bad guys within esports, because esports, just fandom in general and fans, it's way more tech savvy, and they're able to understand the interactions of social media, although they don't understand the actual dynamics of fandom, probably because they haven't really watched a whole lot of sports or anything, or even participated in sports themselves. And so on top of this idea, I think there's this, I guess, unwillingness to challenge the entire, I guess, meta of thought or consensus of what it is to, say in the public eye, or just the line of safety of something that you can say. And as people get more and more angry, the line keeps moving further and further back. Like, I mean, one ridiculous thing that we can all point to is Bang, when he said that he had disliked Burger King, and then he was caught eating a Whopper on stream, and Korean fans went fucking apeshit because he essentially had lied. And it's just like, what madness are we in to where you get mad at a pro player because he's eating a Whopper when he said that he hated Burger King? It's fucking bananas. So I feel like fans have actually killed the role of the heel or the bad guy, because they've just been so, I guess, hearkening on the idea that you must win in order to be able to talk shit or be the bad guy. And the reason why they're able to do that so consistently is because of the stats measurement of just like, well, did you get a W in your column or did you get an L? Oh, you got the L? Fuck you. That means you're bad. You can't talk shit. And we see this over and over again, and the fact that the line of what actual criticism or fundamentals of how you criticize someone or begin to criticize someone is based upon their achievements. And as you basically dislike the person more and more, you just move the achievement up higher and higher. And it's just like, oh, you aren't diamond, that means you're a shitter and your opinion doesn't matter. Oh, you aren't challenger, that means you're a shitter and your opinions don't matter. oh, you aren't Faker, that means your opinions don't fucking matter. And it comes to a point to where there is a person essentially that is the best player in the world that is very difficult to challenge, but you can even hear people talking shit about Faker, even though, he's got multiple different rings. So all in all, I think the fans have killed the heel, and this is why they find this dearth of entertainment, or I guess different personalities within the scene, and that's your own damn fault. You're just spiraling the entire continuation of these personalities to be the same over and over again, and that's entirely your own fault.